So, I'll introduce myself. My name is Alex. I'm the communications manager here at Portland Internetworks. I work with Rainey, who you'll meet in just a moment, to manage our marketing initiatives. Yeah, welcome. I love to do these kind of things, love to sit around and talk to people. So thank you for coming. Rainey, what about you?
I'm Rainey DiCiervo. I'm the marketing coordinator here. Everyone probably already saw my name because I was the one who created the invitation for this event. And I don't think I've met the majority of the people that are on this call. So welcome everyone. And yeah, Doug, go ahead.
Great. Thanks for everybody for coming. I'm Doug Westerveld. I'm the CEO of Portland Internetworks. We are a 23-year-old now as of this month network and IT services company. Started out as an internet service provider back in the 90s and pivoted into the managed services in more recent years. We're located in inner Portland, Oregon, and we've got a staff of about 40, although right now, I think there's just me and one other person in the office right now. Everybody's working remotely, as is probably the case for most of all of you. I had a late night or a late afternoon WebEx yesterday and forgot to plug in my wireless headset. So if suddenly I go mute, everybody like wave their hands crazy around, and I've got like a backup plan in case everything goes completely horrible. I think that's pretty much all about us that I can share with you. And I'm coming to you with some experience. I'm a big traveler normally when the world is not upside down. Spend a lot of time in hotels and airports. And we thought we would share with you a little bit of what I've learned about running a growing business remotely, which things are familiar and similar from traveling and being on the road versus the current situations obviously put a little twist in that. So as Alex mentioned, we're super informal here, like super informal. So don't hesitate to ask any questions. We've already muted Jackie, so she can't ask the hard ones. We've selectively muted all the hecklers. But I'm happy to answer questions off the cuff as well. We've got a few prepared questions for you, though. So,
Cool. Let's dig in. Yeah, so I mentioned I do some of our marketing here at Portland Internetworks, but I also have a little side hustle as Doug's executive assistant. So I've spent a fair amount of time pouring through Doug's travel calendar, and I definitely can attest to the fact that he is an avid traveler and does a great job of running the show remotely. What are some of the similarities between running a business while you're on the road versus when everyone else is effectively on the road and you're back at home?
Sure. I think, when I am traveling, when I'm on an airplane or hotel or a conference, something like that, I think probably as I started to do that, I think most business leaders feel this sort of sense of paranoia or anxiety about the idea that when they're out of the office, everybody's just drinking beer and on Facebook and that sort of thing in the office. So the first thing you need to do is just sort of get over that fear, conquer the anxiety. On the road, I'm well connected and I know I've got a strong team of leaders. So what I generally expect when I'm traveling or whatnot is I'll call in, I'll use WebEx or something like that for meetings. But generally, like I might be the big face on the board in the conference room, and then there's a room of people there that are collaborating and working together to kind of share what they need to do in order to get whatever our business objectives are. The big difference here is that sure, I might be the big face on your monitor or whatnot, but everybody else is now working from a hotel or an airplane or a conference. So how it no longer is just the communication between, say, leaders and other folks in the organization. It's now how do you connect everybody. It becomes, instead of one-to-many sorts of conversations, now it's many one-to-one conversations. So one has to be very careful to say, how can we convey that in a way that is unambiguous for everybody to then take on those multi levels of communication, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think communication is probably like, well, communication is key, as they say. And I think it's probably the most important component that has changed since we've all moved to working remotely. Like I can't just spin around and talk to Rainey about, a social post that we have going up, tomorrow or something like that. How do you feel like being in the same physical environment or not being in the same physical environment impacts the way that you communicate with clients? And then you mentioned a little bit about inside the organization as well.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things that we're missing in the current environment, I'm a little bit used to being the guy on the road, but you have a lot in an isolated fashion that are not used to it. But something I learned in my interpersonal communications class, freshman year college, 100 centuries ago, was how important like visual and nonverbal communication is to a conversation. Alex and I had to go look up what the statistics are, and looking at it, 55% of communication is through body language. The remaining 38% is through tone of voice, and 7% is through actual words. So if you think about it, and if I say, Michelle, here the what I'm hoping that we're going to get done today in an email, then Michelle's only going to get about 7% of what I actually mean by that conversation. The opportunity for misunderstandings, or like, what did he mean by that? Or did he mean tomorrow? Or is this more important than the thing, that he already asked me to do? All kinds of ambiguity and uncertainty and miscommunication possibilities arise. So, I think before sort of the pandemic happened, people might say, well, I'll call them on the phone so I can better explain what it is instead of just a few sentences in an email or a text message. But that would suggest that, you're only getting about 45% of what you're trying to communicate. In the real world that we used to know, there's all these other elements that go into communication, sort of how are you sitting? What's your posture? What do you smell like? How are you dressed? How close are you suggesting that? Are you leaning in to, like, given the funny eyeball and the wink? All those are part of the communication, the context of what it is that you're trying to convey. So like from day one, we rolled out WebEx licenses to everybody on our team. We also are big users of Slack for internal communications, and we said, hey, we want to remove all the obstacles and friction to video communication. We're not like sharing licenses for things where, hey, I don't need to check out my WebEx license or anything like that. Everybody just automatically got it. Whether it's for internal or external communication, all communication is video if it can make it happen. So that's a big change. I think probably a few months ago, you send out a WebEx link to maybe a vendor or a customer or whatnot, and they're going to be very loath or at least hesitant to like turn on the camera. I can appreciate there are so many people that are in attendance today that have their cameras on, because that is part of how communication works. It's much more natural. So we did a little tricky contest at the beginning. I think it was maybe week 2, where we have statistics where we can share or we can see how many meetings our people hosted on video, and we awarded prizes to the folks that hosted the most number of meetings. And those meetings might be with a client, or they might just be at lunchtime asking people, what beer did they drink on the weekend, that sort of thing. But we just really want to remove those obstacles to video communication. I'll mention another thing, something that I posted on LinkedIn a number of weeks ago and got a lot of traction about is our notion that if you've come to Portland Internetworks, you've seen our people, met our people and seen our office, we're all about the logoed where. If you're in grid view, anybody that works at Portland Internetworks right now, you'll see their logo on them. And we established early on that our dress code working from home, it was going to be exactly like the office. Now, I have no idea if anybody's wearing pants or not, but at least from the point where you can see up, everybody's wearing like the same work clothes that they would normally work at, or they would wear to work. Part of that is we're having a lot of external communications that are video. If our people are wearing a t-shirt, there might be a little bit more hesitant to pick up that video call with a coworker or with a client or a vendor. So we felt if everybody, that's going to remove any obstacle to them having like that free communication as we would normally do at work. The other thing is also for mental health. You know, for our workers' families, their friends, maybe the pets, that ability to see that their Portland Internet Worker person is dressed and is at work. It gives them the opportunity for a little space in the house. And then at the end of the day, you know, they can take off their Portland Internet Works gear and then have that separation between kind of work and home. So I thought that was something that was really important for us, and you know, I don't know if that's a well accepted thing. Everybody's doing that, but I know at Portland Internet Works we're all doing that.
Yeah, I think that's it's been really helpful for me. You know, you read all the articles about setting boundaries between, you know, your working self and your personal self and that kind of thing. And so you can disconnect between your work day and your regular, you know, evening with your family or whatever. And I think that's been a really great way to do that because I mean, I love the logos. I love them so much. I love this sweater, this Lands' End. But believe it or not, I do not wear it on the weekend. So it's nice to have that little separation as well. So, so how do you, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add to that. Speaking about separation from work and home, I read a good article about how it's encouraged to actually, even if you're working from home, commute each morning and afternoon. And if that means get up and walk around your block a few times, you know, if you normally have a 15-minute commute into your office, get up, walk around the neighborhood, then settle back in your work from home office, ready to work. And at the end of the day, do the same thing. Like, it helps kind of mentally reset yourself for what your next stage is.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I haven't quite made it there yet. I'm just making the long voyage from my bedroom into my spare bedroom, but someday. So when the lines are a little bit, you know, blurred between your personal life and your, you know, professional life, how do you make sure that your employees are staying on top of their work and that they're performing at the same level, or do you expect them to perform at the same level under these circumstances?
Sure, you know, and I think this is an area of similarity between working from the road, you know, from airplanes and things like that, and then working from home, just when your workforce is separated from, like, you know, your team leaders, is that, well, I'm an outcomes guy. You know, I don't really get too much into the detail about how people do their work unless they need support or help or guidance or training. But my interest is usually about the big picture. Are we achieving the things that we want to achieve? So I tend to look towards, you know, did we hit that? Did we do what we want to get for a month or that sort of thing? The difference here is that because everybody's separated, it's harder for, you know, your reports or your teammates to know if they're sort of misaligned to what the goals are. So I think, you know, whether you're just traveling for or you're working from home, this is a time where you really want to emphasize things like setting expectations and being very clear about them. Because if your team is unsure about what is expected of them, you know, that's when that sort of paranoia creeps in. Like, are they getting anything done? I can't see that, you know, what I asked for is getting completed. It may be because they don't actually know what it is that you wanted. So I think that in like remote working environments, it's tantamount. It's really critical for leaders to be very clear about what the objectives are. And to have check-ins, regular check-ins to reinforce what those are. Again, if you can do those over video, better. Maybe follow up with some notes in an email that says, hey, this is just like, these are the bullet points of the things we talked about. I also think it means that we're challenged as leaders to have, whether it's constructive or corrective conversations earlier rather than later. Because if you think somebody's kind of going off on the wrong tack and you wait a while before you have those conversations, I mean, I think that works out for any relationships, right? You know, it gets off kilter in a big hurry if you don't have those opportunities to kind of get realigned. You know, making sure that people are up to things. You know, the idea of servant leadership is, you know, to remove obstacles for people. What can you do to help your people achieve better. I think it is a lot about removing the friction and obstacles for an impediment to them getting work done. So, for anybody who didn't know from Portland Internet Works, I'm about to reveal a sneaky thing that we did. Early on in this, we had a show us your work from home rig photo contest. Okay, it was really fun. Actually, we had some really cool people like designers, like nice feng shui floral arrangements next to their computer and things like that. We took the winners, we posted them on Instagram. But part of it was also to understand, like, what is the environment that everybody's working on? If they're working from like a bar stool in their kitchen where all their roommates are walking back and forth, that wasn't going to be a super productive work environment for them. We had some people that had like just a laptop sitting on a coffee table, and we didn't know that this was going to be anything more than a few weeks, but we knew that even if you're working from a hotel, and the idea of working is a laptop on your lap, that's not your most productive workspace. So we sent out some furniture, we sent out a bunch of extra monitors, docking stations, all the things that make people more productive in a normal office environment, so that we would get better productivity. Like, oh, I've got back pain, or I'm just feeling like really worn out. We want to have everybody have like the ergonomic productivity setup. It's a conversation I have with customers all the time, especially when maybe if the customer's got a little bit more behind the times technology. Think for a moment, nobody has to share, but think about what your salary is or your compensation, what you're worth to the company. And if I could make you 5% more productive with the addition of additional screen real estate, better keyboard, better docking station, that kind of thing, what's the value of that, right? Multiply that times 3 to 5 years of the life of a good monitor. The ROI on having a proper workspace is huge, and it's immediate, and it also makes you feel valued as an employee. So we looked at this and said, what can we do to help you be more productive? Whatever it is, if it's within reason, we can do it. Of course, at home, some people are working on like a tiny desk, and so they don't have room for 3 monitors and all the things. But we want to make sure that we're providing all the tools that we can.
Speaking of tools, what tools do you use personally to make sure that you're staying on the pulse of what's going on in the business, like business activities and those sorts of things,
Sure.
if you were out of the office?
Well, and I have the good fortune of being in the office right now. It's a very unusual, eerie kind of thing, 13,000 square feet, and there's only 2 of us here. But we've taken a lot into our office that, often people walk around and they're like, wow, you guys have TVs and dashboards and things all over the place. We're very metrics driven, very data driven. And that's one way that we share with each other how we're doing as a team. TVs everywhere, things that are happening in real time. Now, if you're working from the road, that can be a little bit more of a challenge. You can't just look up and look at a dashboard on a wall. However, we've got a lot of tools that we use special to our industry, some that are more generic across industries, that allow us to take a lot of those dashboards and put them in a web browser. So whether I was traveling for a conference or I'm working from home or working at a different desk, I've got a web browser up. In fact, I've got it, you guys can't see it, but I've got 5 different web tabs up right now that are giving me real-time information. I can tell you how many tickets came in this morning, who's working on them right now. I can tell you the last time we closed a sales transaction. Customer satisfaction surveys are coming in, and they're posting on this dashboard in real time. I've got financial dashboards, so I can see, what does our accounts receivable situation look like, who's all the things that are happening in absolute real time. So in the tech world, all the conversation has been about digital transformation. If you think back a few years and the best sort of business analytics or business intelligence you were getting at that time was sort of like weekly reports from your financial people, or maybe a monthly summary or a stand-up, something like that. I can see where leaders would feel very isolated, not knowing what's going on. But there's tons of tools out there, whether you use the tools that we do, or you use something like Power BI, or if you're using some business line applications that provide dashboards, this is a perfect time to utilize those. I never feel, whether I'm on the road or working from home or working across the building, I never feel like I've got a lack of data coming in. I have a pretty good, in a 40-person company, just from one big screen.
Yeah, I think as well, flip the script to where we are today, where you're in the office and everybody else is at home. I think it's beneficial for the folks that are working from home right now as well to see those dashboards, because I think anytime that you see yourself in a list of people as a group, makes you feel like you're connected to everybody. And I think that that's something that we could all use a little bit more of these days. So seeing what slice of the pie is Alex's versus Rainey's versus Doug just like makes us feel like we're a team. So that's another benefit, in my opinion.
We were just talking about this yesterday in our service team leadership meeting about what are some statistics, some metrics, some KPIs that we can share across the team that makes everybody feel like they're kind of pushing for something, right? We settled on, you imagine, or maybe if anybody worked in manufacturing, there's a big sign on the factory floor that says number of days since an industrial accident, something like that. And so we said, looking at our dashboard, the last negative feedback score, I'm not trying to brag, I'm just an example. The last negative feedback score we got from a survey was 16 days ago. And so we started saying, okay, well, what can we do will pull everybody together, right? And we said, okay, well, let's see if we can drive that number as high as possible. There's going to be some things out of our control. Maybe we fix something and it didn't actually fix the problem, and somebody's kind of salty about that. Totally understandable. And they send a negative feedback score. Well, then we start again the next day, and everybody is kind of working at the same goal. We kind of, I think the analogy we used was sort of like, if you're kind of like playing with a volleyball and everybody's kind of like bumping it around the room, and you're counting the times that the ball has been bumped before it hit the floor. And if you're at something like 97, that 98th bump, if necessary, that person's going to sacrifice their body. They're going to dive across the room to not let that ball hit the ground. And if it does, you start over again. But this is like one of those areas where you can take just a KPI and you can get a whole group of people invested and excited about that, and working together.
I forgot to unmute myself. So getting a little bit more granular, what would you say some of the most impactful changes that you can make to like logistical processes or systems to ease the business transactions when everybody's remote?
Sure. As part of my role, I talk to a lot of different business owners, and everybody's situation is different. I was talking to somebody yesterday. Actually, they're having some equipment shipped to our office to stage because their entire building is locked down. Nobody can get in or out. And when you think about all the physical world things that happen in a business day, those are very disrupted right now, right? So we have an office manager in Sarah who's doing a great job, kind of managing paper flow, mail, packages, deliveries, all that kind of stuff. So we have the good fortune of being able to do that. I would say if you have the ability for a person to sort of manage the physical world right now, that's really great, because that takes a lot of stress and relief, or provides relief for everybody else who doesn't have to do physical things in a place. But it's also a great time, if people haven't done it, is to be converting to things like automatic electronic payment, or DocuSign, or even if you don't subscribe to a DocuSign type of subscription, just digitize your signature so that you can add your signature onto PDFs and contracts. I know that if you roll back a few years ago, when I was traveling a lot, especially overseas, one of the biggest disruptions to that was like, well, Doug, what happens if you need to sign something while you're away? You know, like, are we gonna have to send an international fax, and then you're gonna have to like thermal paper and sign it, and then go to an internet cafe and scan it, and you know, fortunately those days are well in the past, but it's remarkable how much effort and energy and sort of disruption happens still from people having to print out a document, sign it, scan it, and then email it somewhere. So this is a great time for email signatures, or a DocuSign, Echo Sign, whatever your flavor is. Electronic payments, that's another thing. We've had a lot of customers asking us, which is funny because, you know, for years we've been asking our customers to pay old-fashioned way. I like a check that I can review and see and maybe hold on to before it goes in the mail. And now people are like, hey, how can I make this easier? I'm inundated with paper. So just a few tools.
Yeah, I think another thing that's really important too is phones. Like, how do you get your phone calls if you're not at your desk? Like,
yeah, you know, so that's another thing. Early on, more people have settled in, but I think that there's still, you know, the new normal for a lot of companies is you go to call somebody back, phone at their desk in their office is ringing, and you're getting their voicemail, and they're having to maybe check their voicemail every couple of hours. They get a message and then they call you from their mobile phone. Or maybe they have somebody who's managing a switchboard and they're saying, well, you know, I don't really have the ability to transfer you because our phone system doesn't support this. And so, you know, here's their mobile number. I'll talk about separation of work and personal life. You know, I don't know if that's a really great long-term solution. So, you know, we've been set up for remote work for many years. We use soft phones, we use call redirection. There's lots of ways. Our whole workforce was set up to work from home, you know, way before this started. But for a lot of companies, that's not the case. And maybe their phone system is sort of legacy, or it's going to be a real hassle to move. I think this is going to be a real great year for cloud-based. We're seeing that a lot right now. There's a lot of interest in it, where people previously were like, hey, you know, the phone system is good. We don't need a bunch of features. It's solid. It's been in production for 15, 16 years. We're going to ride it until it dies. Well, now it's causing all kinds of productivity challenges that I think is actually costing people more money than actually converting over to something. So, you know, as much as I prefer video communication, people are still making phone calls. And if there's a way to kind of, again, reduce friction, remove obstacles by time to do that. That's not a sales pitch for cloud phone systems. I'm just saying it is a good time to do that right now.
yeah, I think it's also nice too because you know, you mentioned like separating work and life and those kinds of things. With most systems, I think, and I know with the system that we use anyway, like I can actually see whether or not my phone call, like a phone call is coming in through my work phone number or my personal number. So if I get a call from some random number through our phone system, I'm going to answer it. But otherwise, I'm probably not going to answer the phone call coming from Texas.
Right. Well, and
Sorry,
that's actually,
I don't want the free vacation.
well, I'll mention, you know, too, for people who've got a little bit more forward phone technology, something I meant to mention before with respect to like, how do you kind of keep on top of, you know, what's going on in your business? Using presence information is very valuable. Our phone tool, and I can see who's on the phone. I can see who's do not disturb. I can see people who are, you know, ready to take a call, people who are idle, that kind of thing. And it's not that I have to have comfort level knowing everybody's sitting at their PC wiggling their mouse, but you know, in the normal world, I might walk over to Tim's desk, and if he's not there, I see, oh well, he's probably in the kitchen or he's in the restroom or something like that. I don't freak out like, oh my gosh, Tim's not here. But in the, you know, in this remote world, if I'm like sending a Slack message to Tim and I call him and he's not answering the phone, oh my gosh, doesn't care about what I have to say anymore. You know, if you have some presence information, you might realize he's on the phone or he's marked himself at lunch or that sort of thing. So I think having that sort of feedback is both productive and also kind of comforting, gives some confidence as to knowing what everybody's doing. Not that I know what everybody is doing at any time, but if I'm freaking out, it's good to know that not everybody's purposely ignoring me. And something else I'll add, when I'm traveling, or even in this environment, be very respectful of people's time zones, right? I'm notorious for the 4 a.m. email, not necessarily because I think that somebody should be doing something at 4 a.m. I just might be in a different time zone. But now sort of those barriers to communication, I could be sending somebody a Slack message, or sending a text message. If I'm not cognizant of people's on and off times, that can come across as very, I don't know, intrusive. Not a good time to be intrusive into people's lives.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also, there are some folks that I would say most people are probably in their own homes, but there are some folks I know that have gone to travel to be with their families right now. So whereas normally we might all be in Portland, that might not be the case. So I think that just helps them feel like you respect their time as well. And like you, their situation, and you're supportive of what they have to do. So
speaking of family and such, it's kind of been fun of seeing everybody working from home, and we're doing a lot of video calls. So I'm seeing all kinds of people's guest room, basement rumpus rooms and foosball tables and things like that. And it's been kind of fun. I feel like I've gotten to know some people a little bit better, because you see a little bit more of their personality, and you might see their kids running through the room, or the cats, on the keyboard with them. It's been kind of fun, actually. I feel like you new level that people kind of had a little bit of a barrier before. Now it's kind of interesting to share, some of your personal world with other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's been, an advantage of this, is I do feel like I have gotten to interact with people differently than I would when I'm in the office. So I'm excited to be able to see everybody again in real life at some point, because I feel like the relationships are just going to be that much stronger, because, I know what your home gym looks like, or, I know your cat likes to sit on your keyboard and unmute you when you're like talking to her or whatever, So I think that's pretty fun. Yeah. So speaking of cultural things, how do you keep people engaged in culture when you're not all together? We are always doing tons and tons of stuff at the office. We've got, ping pong and happy hours and those kind of things, but it's kind of hard to virtually play ping pong.
We're a big culture company, and in addition to having people that are good at technical stuff, we really seek out the people who want to interact with each other, and with clients and their coworkers and teammates and things. And so this is, I think, putting a little bit more strain on us in the spectrum, from black to white, because our people are so much more used to being social. And that's a challenge. I read an article yesterday, something that alluded to some sort of research saying that 1/3 of Americans right now are suffering some symptoms of anxiety or depression. If you're a people person, this social isolation is tough. And we've kind of like genetically bred ourselves, or selected in our company to have very social people. So how do we keep people connected and as part of the culture? We're also a very mission-driven company, very values-driven. And so this is a time where we're really talking about what is it that we're here for? It's not just about fixing computers or putting phone systems in or anything like that. It is much more about helping people and removing business and success. So we're trying to talk a lot more about the things that, what do we stand for? And our daily activities is not just about the tickets that are coming in and processing them and getting them resolved. It's much more about what's our bigger purpose. I'll also say that we're trying to stay engaged with everybody, whether it's through our social posts or things that we're doing. We're doing a lot more silly things. Probably our emoji count in Slack has gone up by 30% or 300%. A lot of ways we're still managing that same, the meeting cadences that we were having. We're still doing all of our all hands meetings. We're still doing internal and external events, and we're having to obviously adapt those. You mentioned ping pong. Certainly there's not much ping pong. We have a cultural bingo contest that we do every month. That was pretty easy to turn into a virtual bingo card. We do a lot of volunteer work as a team normally. And so we're encouraging people to do whatever volunteer work that they can do independently, whether it is, go and donate blood or do things that are more isolated but more conducive to the environment, to the situation as it is. Yeah, I think also just drawing limits. Again, trying to be statistically, if the study is true and a third of us are, suffering from anxiety and depression, being aware of that, being cognizant, being sensitive to that. Everybody's got their own challenges. Some people are taking it more, they're suffering a lot more stress than others, and trying to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's on our culture and wellness bingo card this month is just like send a Slack to somebody that you haven't spoken to in a long time. And I think when you are working from home, it's so easy to just get laser focused on the people that you need to talk to get your work done. And then, of course, you talk to, the people that you live with or your pets or whatever, or FaceTime your mom after work or things like that. But just like having those small little interactions during the day, even if it's just like sending a Giphy and like saying nothing, like I think that those are really fun and they definitely make you feel connected to people. So
absolutely, we've done quite a bit to try to maintain or replicate what our normal cultural activities are in the office, but we're also adapting. Normally on a Friday afternoon when everybody's working in the office, a group of us like gathers up in the kitchen and has a beer and talks about the week and what are they going to do on the weekend, that sort of thing. So we've kind of had to adapt that into a virtual environment, and I'm sure everybody's talking about virtual happy hours and things like that. But what's interesting is our turnout is now much greater for our virtual happy hours on a Friday afternoon than they were in the real world. People now value and they look forward to having that kind of unorganized interaction time, whereas previously, it was like, hey, well, we might see each other in the kitchen anyway. But as part of that, add up some really cool things. Rainey and Alex are geniuses. We had a virtual party goat virtual tour in our internal happy hour a few weeks ago, where we actually had a goat that gets rented out for a was our host of our event, and we got to see where the goats live and learn all kinds of interesting goat facts. We did a happy hour a week ago, 2 weeks ago now, I think, the public happy hour where we had a scavenger hunt that was amazing. I got more in that day running around trying to find things like colanders and things with wheels than I had gotten any other day that week. And so we're trying to stay really creative and adapt the things that were easy before and now they're hard. How can we make them sort of unique and different? A couple of just normal virtual happy hours where everybody's talking about what are they drinking and that sort of thing. We immediately realized we're going to have to make this unique in a different way. So every happy hour that we have now has a theme. There's some, I won't say just organization around it, but there's some sort of like anchor tenant sort of into things that we're doing just to kind of keep things unusual, unique, and quirky.
Yeah, and the virtual happy hours have been so much fun, not just because I get to like, pick the themes based on whatever I want to wear to the happy hour, but it's so interesting to like, because normally if we were having an in-person happy hour at 4 o'clock on a Friday, half the people would be out of the office, or maybe not half, quarter of the people would be out of the office because it's a Friday and people take time off. And then, you just kind of gravitate towards the people that you talk to. But when you're on a big screen and you're sort of like having to weave through and, we're trying to engage with everybody and talk to everybody, you really get to talk to people that you wouldn't necessarily get to. And I think it's actually really neat too, because you mentioned like we're a pretty social bunch in general, but we do have some people that are a little bit more on the shy side. So it's neat because for those folks, they can get to know each other in the chat. So it's like two sort of different environments where nobody really feels like socially uncomfortable because the extroverts are just chatting it up verbally. And then the introverts are sort of, typing away and having their own like equally good conversation. So I think it's been a whole lot of fun. So
Yeah, for sure. And this goes on, the more we're going to evolve the types of activities that we do. We're always trying to come up with creative ideas, but this is a really great opportunity. In our normal, if you go back 6 months ago, there were a lot of times where we're like, well, if we had more time or if we had the right circumstances, we'd come up with something more creative. This is that time. This is all you creative people out there. This is your time to shine, come up with some new ideas. What will be really interesting is to see, when things come back to some sense of normality, like what are these things that we adopted during this period? What's the long tail with those? That we're going to have a lot more video calls with customers and vendors and that sort of thing. I'm expecting that there will be more opportunities to have like virtual happy hours where it's not just the people who were within 15 minutes trafficy drive to your office, the ability to really include people that are farther away. I've got a ton of friends in the UK, and we're probably seeing each other now more because we can get together over video, and there's really no challenges to that other than time zones.
yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because it's as a business leader, you have so many things that you're thinking about and worried about and stressed about and trying to adapt right now in this moment, that I think it's easy to think about, lessons we've learned from this, and that's and get hung up on the more like tactical sort of things, like who's going to be working from home, who's going to be working from the office, is everybody going to be working from home, those kinds of things. But I think it's important to think about the cultural lessons that you've learned and like what you've learned about people, like the actual people that they are, not just the purpose that they serve as well. So that's a really good point. Doug, have you seen because I know you go to a lot of conferences and events and things like that. Have you heard anything about like what people are forecasting that's going to look like moving forward, or lots of things going virtual or being pushed out?
Yeah, I think the latest or the most far in the future event that I've seen that's been rescheduled to a virtual or postponed has been like August. So that to me makes me think that tech conferences are thinking that if it's going to be past August, maybe so you're saying there's still a chance.
Sure.
I think everything between now and the end of summer, has gone virtual. On the plus side, it's also meant that registration fees are down, from $1,000 to zero, or it might mean that their potential audience has grown because people who just generally don't like to travel or they just can't find it in their schedule, now they have the opportunity to do it. And I think it really puts a lot of pressure on event managers to really mix it up and try to make some happen in a unique way. I just had a virtual event with Cisco actually for a couple of days last week, and they were really able to manage that in a unique and engaging way. And I found it a lot less tedious than I was fearing that it might be. So the answer is out there somewhere.
I have a question, Doug, from Steve with the Archdiocese of Portland. Do you anticipate work changing permanently moving forward for some organizations? Meaning, will some employees who used to work in the office but are now remote stay remote?
Yeah, so that's a conversation I'm having with a lot of people. A number of business owners that I know, kind of during this period, they're making decisions about what their lease is coming up, and they're trying to decide, are we going to re-up the lease? Maybe 6 months ago, we were planning on getting into a bigger, and now we're thinking like, do we need space at all? Maybe we need to downsize the amount of space? I think it's going to be a big change. I don't necessarily know for certain that like suddenly everybody's going to take up only 80% of the square footage that they used to. I do know that entering a very weird time for commercial real estate folks. I don't know if looking to see if there's any commercial real estate folks on the call. I don't see anybody, but we put out a poll to our own folks, and I already mentioned that, you know, we kind of almost like genetically select our people who like in-person human-to-human interaction. And we said, you know, from one spectrum is like, I will come to the office as soon as you unlock the door and let me in, to people who are like, hey, actually, I prefer to work from home. I never want to come back to the office. In our particular group, we had nobody who said, I want to work from home permanently. Other companies that I'm talking to, they're finding now people who are much more inclined to work from home. Maybe they have bad commutes, or their work makes them more productive if they have fewer meetings and things going on in their office and they prefer it. I know there's a number of people on this call that work primarily remotely. What I think is interesting is it's going to knock down that barrier where people might have wanted to work from home before, and you know, their bosses or their culture said, well, you know, we don't really want that to happen because, you know, we don't have the technology for it, or we don't know how to supervise people, or we don't know how to deal with it. In the future, where people are going to look back and say, well, it was okay for 5 or 6 months, or whatever it may turn out to be, and we adapted. I think that that is going to force a lot of people to reevaluate what their work from home policy is going to be. Fortunately for us, you know, I'm not anticipating shrinking our office size, and we do have a lot of people that are chomping at the bit for the situation to come back into the office. So I see Jackie's got a question. I saw it a second ago, about what are we doing about for people right now. For people who don't know, Jackie is also in the same business that we are in, last I heard, in IT services. And that is actually that's a question that we are looking at every single week right now, Jackie. We do have project people that are out doing work at customer locations when they can be done in a socially distant, responsible, safe way. And in fact, in the middle of all this, we've done 230, like the bulk of 230 Cisco refresh locations across the US. And so we're still doing projects. It's really tricky is sort of that used to be, you know, side by side with a person interaction, moving files from one computer to another, helping guide people like, okay, here's the your new laptop. This is how it works. This is how it's different than your old one. You know, one of the things I pride our company interact, you know, interpersonally and socially and in tight quarters with people. And that's really changed a lot of things. I know Steve's on the call. We have a very big desktop refresh project just waiting at the gates for everybody to be able to get back into the offices so that we can deploy these to refresh their fleet. That is really the trickiest thing. We've been doing some things kind of on a one-off basis where people are hiring new people, or you know, a computer completely dies and we're doing something where we're setting it up in an interim way. We take it to the location, or we have them put it on the network, and then we do everything remotely. Much less efficient, much less interactive, but in the, you know, in the small quantities, we're able to get that done. Those big fleet refreshes, we're still looking and saying, like, how can we get this done? It's two to tango, and not only do we have to be ready for it, the customer's got to be ready for it, and then we have to negotiate safety protocols that go with it. So we have not solved that problem completely yet, Jackie. If you have, I want to hear about it later. Great. I know we're getting close to.
Yeah, I think Jackie had one. Jackie had one last question. Our biggest challenge is the engineers having to deal with their kids at home. Any suggestions on how to manage other people's children remotely?
Well, you know, something we did early on, we sent care packages to all of our employees with like, you know, a roll of toilet paper and some hand sanitizer and some coffee, because everybody knows like coffee you can't run out of, like they're very important things, you know. Maybe there's a way to send home care packages to people's kids, right? For all of us who are dog owners, you know, maybe some, you know, some chew toy occupied. I'm sure there's something analogy for, you know, how to keep the kids occupied. Maybe send them home with some Xbox bucks or something.
Cool. All right. Does anybody have any other questions? And then we'll move forward with wrapping up. No? Okay. Well, I'm just going to share a couple last details with you. And then we'll be all ready to go. So we do have a couple upcoming events. So aside from this one, which we hope you really, really enjoyed, we have our community virtual happy hour that's happening on June 12th at 4 p.m. So that's going to be similar to what Doug had talked about with scavenger hunts and goats. It's sort of our way of taking our mid-month meetups virtual. So just getting together with everybody in the community, partners, clients, vendors, friends, anybody like that, and just all getting together and, sharing an hour, spending time together. So that's happening on June 12th on WebEx as well. And we also have another, one second. We have another more informational event coming up as well. So this one is called Your Technology Toolbox for the Post-Pandemic Landscape, which is happening June 25th at 10 a.m. also on WebEx. And we're going to talk a little bit about tailoring your technology investments to support a new kind of workplace. And that's like, if you do have half the people working remote, whereas you did before, or you've got different people in different locations or split schedules, how you can spend your technology dollars to support those efforts, because you might need to do a little bit of retooling for that. So for more details on either of those events and RSVP, you can go to our events page on our website, which is pdx.net/events. We are also always posting on our social media channels. So if you follow us, you'll probably see the links pop up. Social. We are very social, as we've mentioned a few times. So you can follow us on our social media accounts. We're Portland Internetworks on Facebook and on LinkedIn, at PDXNet on Instagram, and at PDX_net on Twitter. We post on those channels every single weekday. So if you're looking for something to keep you occupied during your lunch hour or want to keep up on what we're doing, follow us on those channels. We also post regularly to our blog. So those are topics on technology and leadership and company culture, community engagement, those kinds of things. So if you're interested in any of those topics, you can visit us there. Doug also does post on those same topics on his LinkedIn as well. So that is all I've got for you all today. But thank you so much for joining. And if you have any questions on any of the topics that we talked about, you can reach out to myself, reach out to Rainey, reach out to Doug, and we will absolutely answer any questions that you have. We love to talk about this kind of stuff, so don't be shy.
Thanks everybody for your time. Totally appreciate it. Hope to engage with you again soon. And for as many of you as possible, I hope to see you in person before long.